Ready?
Yep.
Let's see, Amarantha went on, reading the paper as she toyed with Jurian's finger bone at the end of her necklace. Yes, I'd say almost my entire court bet on you dying within the first minute. Some said you'd last 5, and she turned over the paper. And just one person said you would win. Insulting, but not surprising. I didn't fight as the adder hauled me out of the trenches, dumping me at the foot of the platform before flying off. My arm burned at the impact. Amarantha frowned at her list, and she waved a hand. Take her away. I tire of her mundane face. She clenched the arms of her throne hard, enough that the whites of her knuckles showed. Rysand, come here. I didn't stay long enough to see the High Lord prowl forward. Red hands grabbed me, holding tightly to keep from sliding off. I'd forgotten the mud caked on me like a second skin. As they yanked me away, a shooting pain shot along my arm and agony blanketed my senses. I looked at my left forearm then, and my stomach rose at the trickling blood and ripped tendons, at the lips of my skin pulled back to accommodate the shaft of a bone shard protruding clean through it. I couldn't even glance back at Tamlin, couldn't find Lucian to say thank you before pain consumed me whole and I could barely manage to walk back to my cell. No one, not even Lucian, came to fix my arm in the days following my victory. The pain overwhelmed me to the point of screaming whenever I prodded the embedded bit of bone, and I had no other option but to sit there, letting the wound gnaw on my strength, trying my best not to think about the constant throbbing that shot sparks of poisoned lightning through me. But worse than that was the growing panic. Panic that the wound hadn't stopped bleeding. I knew what it meant when blood continued to flow. I kept one eye on the wound, either out of hope that I'd find the blood clotting, or the terror that I'd spy the first signs of infection. I couldn't eat the rotten food they gave me. The sight of it aroused such nausea that a corner of my cell now reeked of vomit. It didn't help that I was still covered in mud, and the dungeon was perpetually freezing. I was sitting against the far wall of my cell, savoring the coolness of the stone beneath my back. I'd awoken from a fitful sleep and found myself burning hot, a kind of fire that made everything a bit muddled. My injured arm dangled at my side as I gazed dully at the cell door. It seemed to sway, its lines rippling. This heat in my face was some kind of small cold, not a fever from infection. I put a hand on my chest and dried mud crumbled into my lap. Each of my breaths was like swallowing broken glass. Not a fever, not a fever, not a fever. My eyelids were heavy, stinging. I couldn't go to sleep. I had to make sure the wound wasn't infected. I had to... The door actually did move then. No, not the door, but rather the darkness around it, which seemed to ripple. Real fear coiled in my stomach as a male figure formed out of that darkness, as if he'd slipped in from the cracks between the door and the wall, hardly more than a shadow.
Oh yeah, this is that curved sword. What? I just found the most busted ass one use item ever. Now on to Ford Musket. I forgot that when I take the helmet off, I have to fight my way through everything. For those watching, my wife had to step away from the microphone for just a second, but she will be back to finish reading. I can search these things? What did I just do? I don't know what the point of that is. Where's my food? My wife will be back momentarily to finish reading the book. Oh, okay. So I just pulled junk out of it. Can I shoot those things down? God, that was aggressive. I need to go empty my goddamn inventory.
You want the finest work? You've come to the right place.
Welcome back.
Alright.
I had 5 people join at once, and then you weren't reading, and then they left.
I'm sorry, I had
It's
to work.
fine. That's what I told them. I was like, my wife will be right back. She had to step away for a second to go work.
Okay, so the door actually did move then. No, not the door, but rather the darkness around it, which seemed to ripple. Real fear coiled in my stomach as a male figure formed out of that darkness, as if he'd slipped in from the cracks between the door and the wall, hardly more than a shadow.
Masterpieces.
Rysand was
If you
fully,
need
fully
gear,
corporeal
you
now,
come and
and his
find me.
violet eyes glowed in the dim light. He slowly smiled from where he stood by the door.
A
What a sorry
blazing
state
fire
for
is the
Tamlin's
secret to a
champion.
fine weapon.
Go to hell, I snapped, but the words were little more than a wheeze. My head was light and heavy all at once. If I tried to stand, I would topple over. He stalked closer with that feline grace and dropped into an easy crouch before me. He sniffed, grimacing at the corners splattered with my vomit. I tried to bring my feet into a position more inclined for scrambling away or kicking him in the face, but they were full of lead. Rasan cocked his head. His pale skin seemed to radiate alabaster light. I blinked away the haze, but couldn't even turn aside my face as his cold finger grazed my brow. What would Tamlin say, he murmured, if he knew his beloved was rotting away down here, burning up with
If
fever?
there's
Not that
anything
he
you
can
need,
even come here, not when his every move is watched. I kept my arm hidden in the shadows. The last thing I needed them to know was how weak I was. Get away, I said, and my eyes stung as the
use it
words
well.
burned my throat. I had difficulty swallowing.
Was this what
He
you
raised an
needed?
eyebrow. I come here to offer you help, and you have the nerve to tell me to leave. Get away, I repeated. My eyes were so sore that it hurt to keep them open. You made me a lot of money, you know. I figured I would repay the favor. I leaned my head against the wall. Everything was spinning, spinning like a top, spinning like... I kept my nausea down. Let me see your arm, he said, too quietly.
Take it.
I kept my arm in the shadows, if only because it was too heavy to lift. Let me see it. A growl rippled from him. Without waiting for my reaction, he grabbed my elbow and forced my arm into the dim light of the cell. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, bit it hard enough to draw blood as rivers of fire exploded
Was
inside
this what
me,
you needed?
as my head swam and all my senses narrowed down to the piece of bone sticking through my arm. They couldn't know how bad it was because then they would use it against me. Rysand examined the wound,
Use it
a
well.
smile appearing on his sensuous lips. Oh, that's
Fine
wonderfully
work.
gruesome.
You agree?
I swore at him and he chuckled. Such words from a lady. Get out, I wheezed. My frail voice was as terrifying as the sound. Don't you want me to heal your arm? His fingers
Is
tightened
there
around my
anything
elbow.
you need?
At what cost? I shot back, but kept my head against the stone, needing its damp strength.
Yeah, if you're in a
Ah,
bind,
that.
you
Living
always
among
know
fairies
where
has
to
taught
go.
you some of our ways. I focused on the feeling of my good hand on my knee, focused on the dry mud beneath my fingernails. I'll make a trade with you, he said casually, and gently set my arm down. As it met with the floor, I had to close my eyes to brace against the flow of that poisoned lightning. I'll heal your arm in exchange for you. For 2 weeks every month, 2 weeks of my choosing, you'll live with me at the night court, starting after this messy 3 trials business. My eyes flew open. No. I'd already made one fool's bargain. No. He braced his hands on his knees and leaned closer. Really? Everything was starting to dance. Get
I gotta
out, I
get my
breathed.
charger. Keep going.
You'd turned down my offer, and for what? I didn't reply, so he went on. You must be holding out for one of your friends. For Lucian, correct? After all, he healed you before, didn't he? Oh, don't look so innocent. The Adder and his cronies broke your nose, so unless you have some kind of magic you're not telling us about, I don't think human bones heal that quickly. His eyes sparkled, and he stood, pacing a bit. The way I see things, Feyre, you have 2 options. The first, and the smartest, would be to accept my offer. I spat at his feet, but he kept pacing, only giving me a disapproving look. The second option, and the one only a fool would take, would be for you to refuse my offer and place your life, and thus Tamlin's, in the hands of chance. He stopped pacing and stared hard at me. Though the world spun and danced in my vision, something primal inside me went still and cold beneath that gaze. Let's say I walk out of here. Perhaps Lucian will come to your aid within 5 minutes of my leaving. Perhaps he'll come in 5 days. Perhaps he won't come at all. Between you and me, he's been keeping a low profile after his rather embarrassing outburst at your trial. Amarantha's not exactly pleased with him. Tamlin even broke his delightful brooding to beg for him to be spared. Such a noble warrior, your high lord. She listened, of course, but only after she made Tamlin bestow Lucian's punishment. 20 lashes. I started shaking, sick all over again to think about what it had to have been like for my high lord to be the one to punish his friend. Rhysand shrugged, a beautiful, easy gesture. So it's really a question of how much you're willing to trust Lucian, and how much you're willing to risk for it. Already you're wondering if that fever of yours is the first sign of infection. Perhaps they're unconnected, perhaps not. Maybe it's fine. Maybe that worm's mud isn't full of festering filth. And maybe Amarantha will send a healer, and by that time you'll either be dead or they'll find your arm so infected that you'll be lucky to keep anything above the elbow. My stomach tightened into a painful ball. I don't need to invade your thoughts to know these things. I already know what you've slowly been realizing. He again crouched in front of me. You're dying. My eyes stung and I sucked my lips into my mouth. How much are you willing to risk on the hope that another form of help will come? I stared at him, sending as much hate as I could into my gaze. He'd been the one who'd caused all this. He'd told Amarantha about Claire. He'd made Tamlin beg. Well? I bared my teeth. Go to hell. Swift as lightning, he lashed out, grabbing the shard of bone in my arm and twisting. A scream shattered out of me, ravaging my aching throat. The world flashed black and white and red. I thrashed and writhed, but he kept his grip, twisting the bone a final time before releasing my arm. Panting, half sobbing as the pain reverberated through my body, I found him smirking at me again, and I spat in his face. He only laughed as he stood, wiping his cheek with the dark sleeve of his tunic. This is the last time I'll extend my assistance, he said, pausing by the cell door. Once I leave this cell, my offer is dead. I spat again, and he shook his head. I bet you'll be spitting on Death's face when she comes to claim you too. He began to ripple with darkness, his edges blurring into endless night. He could be bluffing, trying to trip me into accepting his offer, or he might be right. I might be dying. My life depended on it, more than my life depended on my choice. And if Lucian was indeed unable to come, or if he came too late, I was dying. I'd known it for some time now. And Lucian had underestimated my abilities in the past, had never quite grasped my limitations as human. He'd sent me to hunt the Suriel with a few knives and a bow. He'd even admitted to hesitating that day when I had screamed for help, and he might not even know how bad off I was. might not understand the gravity of an infection like this. He might come a day, an hour, a minute too late. Rasan's moon-white skin began to darken into nothing but shadow. Wait. The darkness consuming him paused. For Tamlin. For Tamlin, I would sell my soul. I would give up everything I had for him to be free. Wait, I repeated. The darkness vanished, leaving Rysand in his solid form as he grinned. Yes? I raised my chin as high as I could manage. Just 2 weeks? Just 2 weeks, he purred, and knelt before me. 2 teensy, tiny weeks with me every month is all I ask. Why, and what are to be the terms, I said, fighting past the dizziness. Ah, he said, adjusting the lapel of his obsidian tunic. If I told you these things, there'd be no fun in it, would there? I looked at my ruined arm. Lucian might never come, might decide it wasn't worth risking his life any further, not now that he'd been punished for it. And if Amaranth's healers cut off my arm, Nesta would have done the same for me, for Elaine. And Tamlin had done so much for me, for my family. Even if he had lied about the treaty, about sparing me from its terms, he'd still saved my life that day against the Naga, and saved it again by sending me away to the manor. I couldn't think entirely of the enormity of what I was about to give, or else I might refuse again. I met Rysand's gaze. 5 days. You're going to bargain? Rysand laughed under his breath. 10 days. I held his stare with all my strength. A week. Rysand was silent for a long moment, his eyes traveling across my body and my face before he murmured. A week it is. Then it's a deal, I said. A metallic taste filled my mouth as magic.
Why carry all those trade goods on you? Just leave them with me.
Those watching, give my wife just a second. She is at work while she reads, and so she has to step away from the mic every so often.
Why carry all those I always make sure nothing goes missing.
And the soft jazz in the background is music she has playing at her store. So please be patient.
Don't worry. You could fatten the camp's funds for a bit of trading. I'll keep it. Bring me whatever you want packed.
Looking for someone with...
Press entry double doors open. Okay, I'm back.
I think people really want to listen to you read because I just had 8 viewers.
I'm sorry. I have to do my job too. Okay.
I know, that's what I told everyone. There's still
Okay. Where was
4.
it? All right. His smile became a bit wild, and before I could brace myself, he grabbed my arm. There was a blinding, quick pain, and my scream sounded in my ears as bone and flesh were shattered. Blood rushed out of me, and then Rysand was still grinning when I opened my eyes. I hadn't any idea how long I'd been unconscious, but my fever was gone, and my head was clear as I sat up. In fact, the mud was gone too. I felt as if I'd just bathed. But then I lifted my arm. What have you done to me? Rysand stood, running a hand through his short, dark hair. It's custom in my court for bargains to be permanently marked upon flesh. I rubbed my left forearm and hand, the entirety of which was now covered in whirls and swirls of black ink. When my fingers weren't spared, and a large eye was tattooed in the center of my palm. It was feline, and its slitted pupils stared right back at me. Make it go away, I said, and he laughed. You humans are truly grateful creatures, aren't you? From a distance, the tattoo looked like an elbow-length lace glove, but when I held it close to my face, I could detect the intricate depictions of flowers and curves that flowed throughout to make up a larger pattern. Permanent. Forever. You didn't tell me this would happen. You didn't ask, so how am I to blame? He walked to the door, but lingered, even as pure night wafted off of his shoulders. Unless this lack of gratitude and appreciation is because you fear a certain High Lord's reaction. Hamlin, I could already see his face going pale, his lips becoming thin as the claws came out. I could almost hear the growl he'd emit when he asked me what I'd been thinking. I think I'll wait to tell him until the moment's right, though, Rysand said. The gleam in his eyes told me enough. Rysand hadn't done any of this to save me, but rather to hurt Tamlin, and I'd fallen into his trap, fallen into it worse than the worm had fallen into mine. Rest up, Feyre, Rysand said. He turned into nothing more than living shadow and vanished through a crack in the door. I tried not to look at my left arm as I scrubbed at the floors of the hallway. The ink, which in the light was actually a blue so dark it appeared black, was a cloud upon my thoughts, and those were bleak enough even without knowing I'd sold myself to Rysand. I couldn't look at the eye on my palm. I'd had an absurd, creeping feeling that it watched me. I dunked the large brush into the bucket the red-skinned guards had thrown into my arms. I could barely comprehend them, through their mouths full of long yellow teeth, but when they gave me the brush and bucket and shoved me into a long hallway of white marble, I understood. If it's not washed and shining by supper, one of them had said, its teeth clicking as it grinned, we're to tie you to the spit and give you a few good turns over the fire. With that, they left. I had no idea when supper was, and so I frantically began washing. My back already ached like fire, and I hadn't been scrubbing the marble hall for more than 30 minutes. But the water they'd given me was filthy, and the more I scrubbed the floor, the dirtier it became. When I went to the door to ask for a bucket of clean water, I found it locked. There would be no help. An impossible task, a task to torment me. The spit, perhaps that was the source of the constant screaming in the dungeons. Would a few turns on the spit melt all the flesh from me, or just burn me badly enough to force me into another bargain with Rosand? I cursed as I scrubbed harder, the coarse bristles of the brush clinking and whispering against the tiles. A rainbow of brown was left in their wake, and I growled as I dunked the brush again. Filthy water came out with it, dripping all over the floor. A trail of brown muck grew with each sweep. Breathing quickly, I hurled the brush to the ground and covered my face with my wet hands. I lowered my left hand when I realized the eye was pressed against my cheek. I gulped down steadying grasps of air. There had to be a rational way to do this. There had to be some old wives' trick. The spit, tied to a spit like a roast pig. I grabbed the brush from where it had bounced away and scrubbed at the floor until my hands throbbed. It looked like someone had spilled mud all over the place. The dirt was actually turning into mud the harder I scrubbed it. I'd probably wail and beg for mercy when they rotated me on that spit. There had been red lines covering Claire's naked body. What instrument of torture had they come from? My hands trembled, and I set down the brush. I could take down a giant worm, but washing a floor, that was the impossible task. A door clicked open somewhere down the hall, and I shot to my feet. An auburn head peered at me. I sagged with relief. Lucian. Not Lucian. The face that turned toward me was female and unmasked. She looked perhaps a bit older than Amarantha, but her porcelain skin was exquisitely colored, graced with the faintest blush of rose along her cheeks. Had the red hair not been indication enough, when her russet eyes met mine, I knew who she was. I bowed my head to the lady of the autumn court, and she inclined her chin slightly. I suppose that was honor enough. For giving her your name in place of my son's life, she said, her voice as sweet as sun-warmed apples. She must have been in the crowd that day. She pointed at the bucket with a long, slender hand. My debt is paid. She disappeared through the door she'd opened, and I could have sworn I smelled roasting chestnuts and crackling fires in her wake. It was only after the door shut that I realized I should have thanked her, and only after I looked in my bucket that I realized I'd been hiding my left arm behind my back. I knelt beside the bucket and dipped my fingers into the water. They came out clean. I shuddered, allowing myself a moment to slump over my knees before I dumped some of the water onto the floor and watched it wash away the muck. To the chagrin of the guards, I had completed their impossible task. But the next day they smiled at me as they shoved me into a massive, dark bedroom, lit only by a few candles, and pointed to the looming fireplace. A servant spilled lentils in the ash, one of the guards grunted, tossing me a wooden bucket. Clean it up before the occupant returns, or he'll peel off your skin in strips. A slammed door, the click of a lock, and I was alone. Sorting lentils from ash and embers, ridiculous, wasteful, and I approached the darkening fireplace and cringed. Impossible. I cast a glance along the bedroom. No windows, no exits, save the one I'd just been chucked through. The bed was enormous and neatly made, its black sheets of silk. There was nothing else in the room beyond basic furniture, not even discarded clothes or weapons or books, as if its occupant never slept here. I knelt before the fireplace and calmed my breathing. I had keen eyes, I reminded myself. I could spot rabbits hiding in the underbrush and track most things that wanted to remain unseen. Spotting the lentils couldn't be that hard. Sighing, I crawled farther into the fireplace and began. I was wrong. 2 hours later, my eyes were burning and aching, and even though I combed through every inch of that fireplace, there were always more lentils, more and more that I'd somehow not spotted. The guards had never said when the owner of this room would return, and so every tick of the clock on the mantel became a death knell, every footstep outside the door causing me to reach for the iron poker leaning against the hearth wall. Amarantha had never said anything about not fighting back, Never specified that I wasn't allowed to defend myself. At least I'd go down swinging. I picked through the ashes again and again. My hands were now black and stained, my clothes covered in soot. Surely there couldn't be any more. Surely. The lock clicked and I lunged for the poker as I shot to my feet, my back to the hearth and the iron rod hidden behind me. I have a customer. BRB.
Front entry double doors open. Front entry double doors open.
Darkness entered the room, guttering the candles with a snow-kissed breeze. I gripped the poker harder, pressing against the stone of the fireplace, even as that darkness settled on the bed and took a familiar form. As wonderful as it is to see you, Feyre darling, Rhysand said, sprawling on the bed, his head propped up by a hand. Do I want to know why you're digging through my fireplace? I bent my knees slightly, preparing to run, to duck, to do anything to get to that door that felt far, far away. They said I had to clean out lentils from the ashes or you'd rip off my skin. Did they now? A feline smile. Do I have you to thank for this idea? I hissed. He wasn't allowed to kill me, not with my bargain with Amarantha, but there were other ways to hurt me. Oh no, he drawled. No one's learned of our little bargain yet, and you've managed to keep it quiet. Shame riding you a bit hard? I clenched my jaw and pointed to the fireplace with one hand, still keeping the poker tucked behind me. Is this clean enough for you? Why were there lentils in my fireplace to begin with? I gave him a flat look. One of your mistress's household chores, I suppose. He said, examining his nails. Apparently, she and her cronies think I'll find some sport with you. My mouth dried up. Or it's a test for you, I managed to get out. You said you bet on me during my first task. She didn't seem pleased about it. And what could Amarantha possibly have to test me about? I didn't balk from that violet stare. Amarantha's whore, Lucian had once called him. You lied to her. About Claire, you knew very well that I looked like. Rysand sat up in a fluid movement and braced his forearms on his thighs. Such grace contained in such a powerful form. I was slaughtering on the battlefield before you were even born, he'd once said to Lucian. I didn't doubt it. Amarantha plays her games, he said simply, and I play mine. It gets rather boring down here day after day. She let you out for fire night, and you somehow got out to put that head in the garden. She asked me to put that head in the garden, and as for fire night, he looked me up and down. I had my reasons to be out then. Do not think, Feyre, that it did not cost me. He smiled again, and it didn't meet his eyes. Are you going to put down that poker, or can I expect you to start swinging soon? I swallowed my curse and brought it out, but didn't put it down. A valiant effort, but useless, he said. True, so true, when he didn't even need to take his hands out of his pockets to grip Lucian's mind. How is it that you have such power still, and the others don't? I thought she robbed you of all of your abilities. He lifted a groomed, dark brow. Oh, she took my powers. This... A caress of talons against my mind. I jerked back a step, slamming into the fireplace. The pressure on my mind vanished. This is just the remnant, the scraps I get to play with. Your Tamlin has brute strength and shape-shifting. My arsenal is a far deadlier assortment. I knew he wasn't bluffing, not when I'd felt those talons in my mind. So you can't shapeshift? It's not some High Lord specialty? Oh, all the High Lords can. Each of us has a beast roaming beneath our skin, roaring to get out. While your Tamlin prefers fur, I find wings and talons to be more entertaining. A lick of cold kissed down my spine. Can you shift now, or did she take that too? So many questions from a little human. But the darkness that hovered around him began to writhe and twist and flare as he rose to his feet. I blinked and it was done. I lifted the iron poker just a little bit. Not a full shift, you see, Rysand said, clicking back the razor-sharp talons that had replaced his fingers. Below the knee, darkness stained his skin, but talons also gleamed in lieu of toes. I don't particularly like yielding wholly to my baser side. Indeed, it was still Rysand's face, his powerful male body, but flaring out behind him were massive black membranous wings, like a bat's, like the adder's. He tucked them in tight neatly behind him, but the single claw at the apex of each peeked over his broad shoulders. Horrific, stunning, the face of 1,000 nightmares and dreams. That again useless part of me stirred at the sight, the way the candlelight shone through the wings, illuminating the veins, the way it bounced off his talons. Rysand rolled his neck, and it all vanished in a flash. The wings, the talons, the feet, leaving only the male behind, well-dressed and unruffled. No attempts at flattery. I had made a very, very big mistake in offering my life to him. But I said, you have a high enough opinion of yourself already. I doubt the flattery of a little human matters much to you. He let out a low laugh that slid along my bones, warming my blood. I can't decide whether I should consider you admirable or very stupid for being so bold with a High Lord. Only around him did I have trouble keeping my mouth shut, it seemed, so I dared to ask, do you know the answer to the riddle? He crossed his arms. Cheating, are you? She never said I couldn't ask for help. Ah, but after she had you beaten to hell, she ordered us not to help you. I waited, but he shook his head. Even if I felt like helping you, I couldn't. She gives the order, and we all bow to it. He picked a fleck of dust off his black jacket. It's a good thing she likes me, isn't it? I opened my mouth to press him, to beg him. If it meant instantaneous freedom. Don't waste your breath, he said. I can't tell you. No one here can. If she ordered us all to stop breathing, we would have to obey that, too. He frowned at me and snapped his fingers. The soot, the dirt, the ash vanished off my skin, leaving me as clean as if I'd bathed. There. A gift for even having the balls to ask. I gave him a flat stare, but he motioned to the hearth. It was spotless, and my bucket was filled with lentils. The door swung open of its own accord, revealing the guards who dragged me here. Rasan waved a lazy hand at them. She accomplished her task. Take her back. They grabbed for me, but he bared his teeth in a smile that was anything but friendly, and they halted. No more household chores, no more tasks, he said, his voice an erotic caress. Their yellow eyes went glazed and dull, their sharp teeth gleaming as their mouths slackened. Tell the others to stay out of her cell and don't touch her. If you do, you're to take your own daggers and gut yourselves. Understood? Dazed, numb nods, then they blinked and straightened. I hid my trembling. Glamour, mind control, whatever it was he had done, it worked. They beckoned, but didn't dare touch me. Rasan smiled at me. You're welcome, he purred as I walked out. From that point on, each morning and evening, a fresh, hot meal appeared in my cell. I gobbled it down, but cursed Rasan's name anyway. Stuck in the cell, I had nothing to do but ponder Amarantha's riddle, usually only to wind up with a pounding headache. I recited it again and again and again, but to no avail. Days passed, and I didn't see Lucian or Tamlin, and Rasan never came to taunt me. I was alone, utterly alone, locked in silence, though the screaming in the dungeon still continued day and night. When that screaming became too unbearable and I couldn't shut it out, I would look at the eye tattooed on my palm. I wondered if he'd done it to quietly remind me of Jurian, a cruel, petty slap to the face indicating that perhaps I was well on my way to belonging to him, just as the ancient warrior now belonged to Amarantha. Every once in a while I'd say a few words to the tattoo, then curse myself for a fool, or curse Rasan, but I could have sworn that as I dozed off one night, it blinked. If I was counting the schedule of my meals correctly, about 4 days after I'd seen Rasan in his room, 2 high-fae females arrived in my cell. They appeared through the cracks from slivers of darkness, just as Rasan had, but while he'd solidified into a tangible form, these fairies remained mostly made of shadow, their features barely discernible, save for their loose, flowing, cobweb gowns. They remained silent when they reached for me. I didn't fight them. There was nothing to fight them with, and nowhere to run. The hands they clasped around my forearms were cool, but solid, as if the shadows were a coating, a second skin. They had to have been sent by Rasan, some servants of his from the Night Court. They could have been mutes for all they said to me as they pressed close to my body, and we physically stepped through the closed door, as if it wasn't even there. As if I had become a shadow too. My knees buckled at the sensation, like spiders crawling down my spine, my arms as we walked through the dark, shrieking dungeons. None of the guards stopped us. They didn't even look in our direction. We were glamored then, no more than flickering darkness to the passing eye. The fairies brought me up through dusty stairwells and down forgotten halls until we reached a nondescript room where they stripped me naked, bathed me roughly, and then, to my horror, began to paint my body. Their brushes were unbearably cold and ticklish, and their shadowy grips were firm when I wriggled. Things only worsened when they painted more intimate parts of me, and it was an effort to keep from kicking one of them in the face. They offered no explanation for why, no hint of whether this was another torment sent by Amarantha. Even if I fled, there was nowhere to escape. Not without damning Tamlin further. So I stopped demanding answers, stopped fighting back, and let them finish. From the neck up, I was regal. My face was adorned with cosmetics, rouge on my lips, a smearing of gold dust on my eyelids, kohl lining my eyes, and my hair was coiled around a small golden diadem embedded with lapis lazuli. But from the neck down, I was a heathen god's plaything. They had continued the pattern of the tattoo on my arm, and once the blue-black paint had dried, they placed me in a gauzy white dress. If you could call it a dress. It was little more than 2 long shafts of gossamer, just wide enough to cover my breasts, pinned at each shoulder with gold brooches. The sections flowed down to a jeweled belt, slung low across my hips, where they joined into a single piece of fabric that hung between my legs, and to the floor. It barely covered me, and from the cold air on my skin, I knew that most of my backside was left exposed. The cold breeze caressing my bare skin was enough to kindle my rage. The 2 high-fae ignored my demands to be clothed in something else, their impossibly shadowed faces veiled from me, but held my arms firm when I tried to rip the shift off. I wouldn't do that, a deep, lilting voice said from the doorway. Rysand was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. I should have known it was his doing, should have known from the matching designs all over my body. Our bargain hasn't started yet, I snapped. The instincts that had once told me to be quiet around Tam and Lucian utterly failed me when Rysand was near. But I need an escort for the party. His violet eyes glittered with stars, and when I thought of you squatting in the cell that night, alone. He waved a hand, and the fairy servants vanished through the door behind him. I flinched as they walked through the wood, no doubt an ability everyone in the night court possessed, and Rysand chuckled. You look just as I hoped you would. From the cobwebs of my memory, I recalled similar words Tamlin had once whispered into my ear. Is this necessary? I said, gesturing to the paint and clothing. Of course, he said coolly. How else would I know if anyone touches you? He approached, and I braced myself as he ran a finger along my shoulder, smearing the paint. As soon as his finger left my skin, the paint fixed itself, returning the design to its original form. The dress itself won't mar it, and neither will your movements, he said, his face close to mine. His teeth were far too near to my throat. And I'll remember precisely where my hands have been. But if anyone else touches you, let's say a certain high lord who enjoys springtime, I'll know. He flicked my nose. And Feyre, he added, his voice a caressing murmur, I don't like my belongings tampered with. Ice wrapped around my stomach. He owned me for a week every month. Apparently, he thought that extended to the rest of my life, too. Come, Rysand said, beckoning with a hand. We're already late. We walked through the halls. The sounds of merriment rose ahead of us, and my face burned as I silently bemoaned the too sheer fabric of my dress. Beneath it, my breasts were visible to everyone, the paint hardly leaving anything to the imagination, and the cold cave air raised goosebumps on my skin. With my legs, sides, and most of my stomach exposed, save for the slender shafts of fabric, I had to clench my teeth to keep them from chattering. My bare feet were half frozen, and I hoped that wherever we were going would have a giant fire. Queer, off-kilter music brayed through two stone doors that I immediately recognized. The throne room. No, any place but here. Fairies and high fae gawked as we passed through the entrance. Some bowed to Rysand, while others gaped. I spied several of Lucian's older brothers gathered just inside the doors. The smiles they gave me were nothing short of vulpine. Rysand didn't touch me, but he walked close enough for it to be obvious that I was with him, that I belonged to him. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd attached a collar and leash around my neck. Maybe he would at some point, now that I was bound to him, the bargain marked on my flesh. Whispers snaked under the shouts of celebrating, and even the music quieted as the crowd parted and made a path for us to Amarantha's dais. I lifted my chin, the weight of the crown digging into my skull. I'd beaten her first task. I'd beaten her menial chores. I could keep my head high. Tamlin was seated beside her on that same throne, in his usual clothing, no weapon sheathed anywhere on him. Rysand had said that he wanted to tell him at the right moment, that he'd wanted to hurt Tamlin by revealing the bargain I'd made. Prick. Scheming, wretched prick. Merry Midsummer, Rysand said, bowing to Amarantha. She wore a rich gown of lavender and orchid purple, surprisingly modest. I was a savage before her cultivated beauty. What have you done with my captive? She said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tamlin's face was like stone save for the white-knuckled grip on the arms of his throne. No claws. He was able to keep that sign of his temper at bay, at least. I'd done such a foolish thing in binding myself to Rysand. Rysand, with the wings and talons lurking beneath that beautiful, flawless surface. Rysand who could shatter minds. I did it for you, I wanted to shout. We made a bargain, Rysand said. I flinched as he brushed a stray lock of my hair from my face. He ran his fingers down my cheek, a gentle caress. The throne room was all too quiet as he spoke his next words to Tamlin. 1 week with me at the night court every month in exchange for my healing services after her first task. He raised my left arm to reveal the tattoo, whose ink didn't shine as much as the paint on my body. For the rest of her life, he added casually, but his eyes were now upon Amarantha. The fairy queen straightened a little bit. Even Jurian's eyes seemed fixed on me, on Rysand. For the rest of my life. He said it as if it were going to be a long, long while. He thought I was going to beat her tasks. I stared at his profile, at the elegant nose and sensuous lips. Games. Rysand liked to play games, and it seemed I was now to be a key player in whatever this one was. Enjoy my party, was Amarantha's only reply as she toyed with the bone at the end of her necklace. Dismissed, Rysand put a hand on my back to steer us away, to turn me from Tamlin, who still gripped the throne. The crowd kept a good distance, and I couldn't acknowledge any of them, out of fear I might have to look at Tamlin again, or might spy Lucian, glimpse the expression on his face when he beheld me. I kept my chin up. I wouldn't let the others notice that weakness. Wouldn't let them know how much it killed me to be so exposed to them, to have Rysand's symbols painted over nearly every inch of my skin, to have Tamlin see me so debased. Rysand stopped before a table laden with exquisite foods. The high fae around it quickly cleared away. If there were any other members of the night court present, they didn't ripple with darkness the way Rysand and his servants didn't dare approach him. The music grew loud enough to suggest there was probably dancing somewhere in the room. Hey, I need you to mute yourself when you're hitting your vape, because it is just fucking
Oh,
awful in my ear.
sorry, I didn't know. I'll mute the
You're
microphone.
good. Thank you. Wine, he said, offering me a goblet. Alice's first rule. I shook my head. He smiled and extended the goblet again. Drink, you'll need it. Drink, my mind echoed, and my fingers stirred, moving toward the goblet. No, no, Alice said not to drink the wine here. Wine that was different from that joyous, freeing solstice wine. No, I said, and some of the fairies who were watching us from a safe distance chuckled. Drink, he said, and my traitorous fingers latched onto the goblet. I awoke in my cell, still clad in that handkerchief he called a dress. Everything was spinning so badly that I barely made it to the corner before I vomited, again and again. When I'd emptied my stomach, I crawled to the opposite corner of the cell and collapsed. Sleep came fitfully as the world continued to twirl violently around me. I was tied to a spinning wheel, going around and around and around. Needless to say, I was sick a fair amount that day. I'd just finished picking at the hot dinner that had appeared moments before when the door creaked and a golden fox face appeared, along with a narrowed metal eye. Shit, Lucian said, it's freezing in here. It was, but I was too nauseated to notice. Keeping my head up was an effort, let alone keeping the food down. He unclasped his cloak and set it around my shoulders. Its heavy warmth leaked into me. Look at all this, he said, staring at the paint on me. Thankfully it was still intact, save for a few places on my waist. Bastard. What happened? I got out, even though I wasn't sure I truly wanted the answer. My memory was a dark blur of wild music. Lucian drew back. I don't think you want to know. I studied the few smudges on my waist, marks that looked like hands had held me. Who did that to me? I asked quietly, my eyes tracing the arc of the spoiled paint. Who do you think? My heart clenched, and I looked at the floor. Did Tamlin see it? Lucian nodded. Rhys was only doing it to get a rise out of him. Did it work? I still couldn't look Lucian in the face. I knew, at least, that I hadn't been violated beyond touching my sides. The paint told me that much. No, Lucian said, and I smiled grimly. What was I doing the whole time? So much for Alice's warning. Lucian let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his red hair. He had you dance for him for most of the night, and when you weren't dancing, you were sitting in his lap. What kind of dancing? I pushed. Not the kind you were doing with Tamlin on Solstice, Lucian said, and my face heated. From the murkiness of my memories of last night, I recalled the closeness of a certain pair of violet eyes that sparkled with mischief as they beheld me. In front of everyone? Yes, Lucian replied, more gently than I'd heard him speak to me before. I stiffened. I didn't want his pity. He sighed and grabbed my left arm, examining the tattoo. What were you thinking? Didn't you know I'd come as soon as I could? I yanked my arm from him. I was dying. I had a fever. I was barely able to keep conscious. How was I supposed to know you'd come? That you even understood how quickly humans can die of that sort of thing? You told me you hesitated that time with the Naga. I swore an oath to Tamlin. I had no other choice. You think I'm going to trust you after everything you said to me at the manor? I risked my neck for you during your task. Was that not enough? His metal eye whirred softly. You offered up your name for me. After all that I said to you, all I did, you still offered up your name. Didn't you realize it would help you after that, oath or no oath? I hadn't realized it would mean anything to him at all. I had no other choice, I said again, breathing hard. Don't you understand what Reese is? I do, I barked, and then sighed. I do, I repeated, and glared at the eye in my palm. It's done with. So you needn't hold to whatever oath you swore to Tamlin to protect me, or feel like you owe me anything for saving you from Amarantha. I would have done it just to wipe the smirk off your brothers' faces.
You've found a
Lucian clicked
fine
his tongue, but his
unsavory
remaining russet
need
eyes
something
shone.
repaired.
I'm glad to see you didn't sell your lively human
Well
spirit
then,
or stubbornness to Reese. Just a week of my life every month. Yes, well, we'll see about that when the time comes, he growled, that metal eye flicking to the door. He stood. I should go. The rotation's about to shift. He made it a step before I said, I'm sorry that she still punished you for helping me during my task. I heard, my throat tightened. I heard what she made Tamlin do to you. He shrugged, but I added, thank you. For helping me, I mean. He walked to the door, and for the first time I noticed how stiffly he moved. It's why I couldn't come sooner, he said, his throat bobbing. She used our powers to keep my back from healing. I haven't been able to move until today. Breathing became a little difficult. Here, I said, removing his cloak and standing to hand it to him. The sudden cold sent goose flesh rippling over me. Keep it. I swiped it off a dozing guard on my way in here. In the dim light, the embroidered symbol of a sleeping dragon glimmered, Amarantha's coat of arms. I grimaced, but shrugged it on. Besides, Lucian added with a smirk, I've seen enough of you through that gown to last a lifetime. I flushed as he opened the door. Wait, I said, is Tamlin all right? I mean that spell Amarantha has him under to make him so silent. There's no spell. Hasn't it occurred to you that Tamlin is keeping quiet to avoid telling Amarantha which form of your torment affects him most? No, it hadn't. He's playing a dangerous game, though, Lucian said, slipping out the door. We all are. The next night I was again washed, painted, and brought to that miserable throne room. Not a ball this time, just some evening entertainment. Which, it turned out, was me. After I drank the wine, though, I was mercifully unaware of what was happening. Night after night I was dressed in the same way, and made to accompany Rhysand to the throne room. Thus I became Rhysand's plaything, the harlot of Amarantha's whore. I woke with vague shards of memories, of dancing between Rhysand's legs as he sat in a chair and laughed, of his hands stained blue from the places they touched on my waist, my arms, but somehow never more than that. He had me dance until I was sick, and once I was done retching, told me to begin dancing again. I awoke ill and exhausted each morning, and though Rhysand's order to the guards had indeed held, the nightly activities left me thoroughly drained. I spent my days sleeping off the fairy wine, dozing to escape the humiliation I endured. When I could, I contemplated Amarantha's riddle, turning over every word, to no avail. And when I again entered that throne room, I was allowed only a glimpse of Tamlin before the drug of the wine took hold. But every time, every night, just for that one glance, I didn't hide the love and pain that welled in my eyes when they met his. I had finished painting and dressed, my gossamer gown a shade of blood orange that night, when Rhysand entered the room. The shadow maids, as usual, walked through the walls and vanished. But rather than beckon me to come with him, Rhysand closed the door. Your second trial is tomorrow night, he said neutrally. The gold and silver thread in his black tunic shone in the candlelight. He never wore another color. It was like a stone to the head. I'd lost count of the days. So? It could be your last, he said, and leaned against the door frame, crossing his arms. If you're taunting me into playing another game of yours, you're wasting your breath. Aren't you going to beg me to give you a night with your beloved? I'll have that night, and all the ones after when I beat her final task. Rhysand shrugged, then flashed a grin as he pushed off the door and stepped toward me. I wonder if you were this prickly with Tamlin when you were his captive. He never treated me like a captive or a slave. No, and how could he? Not with the shame of his father and brother's brutality always weighing on him, the poor, noble beast. But perhaps if he'd bothered to learn a thing or two about cruelty, about what it means to be a true High Lord, it would have kept the spring court from falling. Your court fell too. Sadness flickered in those violet eyes. I wouldn't have noticed it had I not felt it deep inside me. My gaze drifted to the eye etched in my palm. What manner of tattoo exactly had he given me? But instead I asked, when you were roaming freely on Fire Night at the Rite, you said it cost you. Were you one of the High Lords that sold allegiance to Amarantha in exchange for not being forced to live down here? Whatever sadness had been in his eyes vanished. Only cold, glittering calm remained. I could have sworn a shadow of mighty wings stained the wall behind him. What I do or have done for my court is none of your concern. And what has she been doing for the past 49 years? Holding court and torturing everyone as she pleases? To what end? Tell me about the threat she poses to the human world, I wanted to beg. Tell me what all of this means. Why so many awful things had to happen. I have a customer. I'll be right back.
Front entry double doors open. Front entry double doors open.
Oh, shoot. Where was I? Okay, I found it.
Somebody commented while you were reading.
Oh, nice.
They said, "My breasts?" Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yes. Titties. It's a smutty fairy book. I don't know.
That's all I commented was said that you were reading A Court of Roses, Thorns and Roses.
Yep. Try again. You got this. Okay. The Lady of the Mountain needs no excuses for her actions. But the festivities await. He gestured to the door behind him. I knew I was on dangerous ground, but I didn't care. What do you want with me, beyond taunting Tamlin? Taunting him is my greatest pleasure, he said with a mock bow. And as for your question, why does any male need a reason to enjoy the presence of a female? You saved my life. And through your life, I saved Tamlin's. Why? He winked, smoothing his blue-black hair. That, Feyre, is the real question, isn't it? With that, he led me from the room. We reached the throne room, and I braced myself to be drugged and disgraced again. But it was Rysand the crowd looked at, Rysand whom Lucien's brothers monitored. Amarantha's clear voice rang out of the music, summoning him. He paused, glancing at Lucien's brothers stalking toward us, their attention pinned on me. Eager, hungry, wicked. I opened my mouth, not too proud to ask Rysand not to leave me alone with them while he dealt with Amarantha, but he put a hand on my back and nudged me along. Just stay close and keep your mouth shut, he murmured in my ear as he led me by the arm. The crowd parted as if we were on fire, revealing all too soon what was before us. Not us, I amended, but Rysand. A brown-skinned, high-fey male was sobbing on the floor before the dais. Amarantha was smiling at him like a snake, so intently that she didn't even spare me a glance. Beside her, Tamlin remained utterly impassive, a beast without claws. Rysand flicked his eyes to me, a silent command to stay at the edge of the crowd. I obeyed, and when I lifted my attention to Tamlin, waiting for him to look, just look at me, he did not, his focus wholly on the queen, on the male before her. Point taken. Amarantha caressed her ring, watching every movement that Rysand made as he approached. The summer lordling, she said of the male cowering at her feet, tried to escape through the exit to the spring court lands. I want to know why. There was a tall, handsome fey male standing at the crowd's edge. His hair near white, eyes of crushing crystal blue, his skin of richest mahogany. But his mouth was drawn as his attention darted between Amarantha and Rysand. I'd seen him before, during that first task. The High Lord of the Summer Court. Before, he'd been shining, almost leaking golden light. Now he was muted, drab, as if Amarantha had leached every last drop of power from him while she interrogated his subject. Rysand slid his hands into his pockets and sauntered closer to the male on the ground. The summer fairy cringed, his face shining with tears. My own bowels turned watery with fear and shame as he wet himself at the side of Rysand. Please, he gasped out. The crowd was breathless, too silent. His back to me, Rysand's shoulders were loose, not a stitch of clothing out of place. But I knew his talons had latched onto the fairy's mind the moment the male stopped shaking on the ground. The High Lord of Summer had gone still, too, and it was pain, real pain and fear that shone in those stunning blue eyes. Summer was one of the courts that had rebelled, I remembered. So this was a new, untested High Lord who had not yet had to make choices that cost him lives. After a moment of silence, Rysand looked at Amarantha. He wanted to escape, to get to the spring court, cross the wall, and feast south into the human territory. He had no accomplices, no motive beyond his own pathetic cowardice. He jerked his chin toward the puddle of piss beneath the mail. But out of the corner of my eye I saw the Summer High Lord sag a bit, enough to make me wonder what sort of choice Rhys had made in that moment he'd taken to search the male's mind. But Amarantha rolled her eyes and slouched in her throne. Shatter him, Rysand. She flicked a hand at the High Lord of the Summer Court. You may do what you want with the body afterward. The High Lord of the Summer Court bowed, as if he'd been given a gift, and looked to his subject, who had gone still and calm on the floor, hugging his knees. The male fairy was ready, relieved. He slipped a hand out of his pocket, and it dangled at his side. I could have sworn phantom talons flickered there as his fingers curled slightly. I'm growing bored, Rysand, Amarantha said with a sigh, again fiddling with that bone. She hadn't looked at me once, too focused on her current prey. Rysand's fingers curled into a fist. The fairy male's eyes went wide and then glazed as he slumped to the side in the puddle of his own waste. Blood leaked from his nose, from his ears, pooling on the floor. That fast, that easily, that irrevocably. He was dead. I said shatter his mind, not his brain, Amarantha snapped. The crowd murmured around me, stirring. I wanted nothing more than to fade back into it, to crawl back into my cell and burn this from my mind. Tamlin hadn't flinched, not a muscle. What horrors had he witnessed in his long life that this hadn't broken that distant expression, that control? Rysand shrugged, his hand sliding back into his pocket. Apologies, my queen. He turned away without being dismissed, and didn't look at me as he strode for the back of the throne room. I fell into step beside him, reining in my trembling, trying not to think about the body sprawled behind us, or about Claire, still nailed to the wall. The crowd stayed far, far back as we walked through it. Whore, some of them softly hissed at him out of her earshot. Amarantha's whore. But many offered tentative, appreciative smiles and words. Good that you killed him. Good that you killed the traitor. Rasan didn't deign to acknowledge any of them, his shoulders still loose, his footsteps unhurried. I wondered whether anyone but he and the High Lord of the Summer Court knew that the killing had been a mercy. I was willing to bet that there had been others involved in that escape plan, perhaps even the High Lord of the Summer Court himself. But maybe keeping those secrets had only been done in aid of whatever games Rasan liked to play. Maybe sparing that fairy male by killing him swiftly, rather than shattering his mind and leaving him a drooling husk, had been another calculated move, too. He didn't pause once on that long trek across the throne room, but when we reached the food and wine at the back of the room, he handed me a goblet and downed one alongside me. He didn't say anything before the wine swept me into oblivion. My second task arrived. Its teeth gleaming, the adder grinned at me as I stood before Amarantha. Another cavern, smaller than the throne room, but large enough to perhaps be some sort of old entertaining space. It had no decorations, save for its gilded walls, and no furniture. The queen herself only sat on a carved wooden chair, Tamlin standing behind her. I didn't gaze too long at the adder, who lingered on the other side of the queen's chair, its long, slender tail slashing across the floor. It only smiled to unnerve me. It was working. Not even gazing at Tamlin could calm me. I clenched my hands at my side as Amarantha smiled. Well, Feyre, your second trial has come. She sounded so smug, so certain that my death hovered nearby. I'd been a fool to refuse death in the teeth of the worm. She crossed her arms and propped her chin on a hand. Within the ring, Jurian's eyes turned to face me, its pupil dilating in the dim light. Have you solved my riddle yet? I didn't deign to make a response. Too bad, she said. But I'm feeling generous tonight. The adder chuckled, and several fairies behind me gave hissing laughs that snaked their way up my spine. How about a little practice, Amarantha said, and I forced my face into neutrality. If Tamlin was playing indifferent to keep us both safe, so would I. But I dared a glance at my High Lord and found his eyes hard upon me. If I could just hold him, feel his skin for just a moment, smell him, hear him say my name. A slight hiss echoed across the room, dragging my gaze away. Amarantha was frowning up at Tamlin from her seat. I hadn't realized we'd been staring at each other, the cavern wholly silent. Begin, Amarantha snapped. Before I could brace myself, the floor shuddered. My knees wobbled and I swung my arms to keep upright as the stones beneath me began sinking, lowering me into a large rectangular pit. Some fairies cackled, but I found Tamlin's stare again and held it until I was lowered so far down that his face disappeared beyond the edge. I scanned the four walls around me, looking for a door, for any sign of what was to come. 3 of the walls were made of a single sheet of smooth, shining stone, too polished and flat to climb. The other wall wasn't a wall at all, but an iron gate splitting the chamber in two, and through it, my breath caught in my throat. Lucien. Lucien lay chained to the center of the floor on the other side of the chamber, his remaining russet eye so wide that it was surrounded with white. The metal one spun as if set wild, his brutal scar was stark against his pale skin. Again, he was to be Amarantha's Tory, to torment. There were no doors, no way for me to get to his side except to climb over the gate between us. It had such thick, wide holes that I could probably climb it to jump into his side. I didn't dare. The fairies began murmuring and gold clinked. Had Rasan bet on me again? In the crowd, a red hair gleamed, 4 heads of red hair, and I stiffened my spine. I knew his brothers would be smiling at Lucien's predicament. But where was his mother? His father? Surely the High Lord of the Autumn Court would be present. I scanned the crowd. No sign of them, only Amarantha, standing with Tamlin at the edge of the pit, peering in. She bowed her head to me and gestured with an elegant hand to the wall beneath her feet. Here, Feyre darling, you shall find your task. Simply answer the question by selecting the correct lever, and you'll win. Select the wrong one. Select the wrong one to your doom. As there are only 3 options, I think I gave you an unfair advantage. She snapped her fingers, and something metallic groaned. That is, she added, if you can solve the puzzle in time. Not too high above, the 2 giant, spike-encrusted gates I dismissed as chandeliers began lowering, slowly descending toward the chamber. I whirled to Lucien. That was the reason for the gate cleaving the chamber in two, so I would have to watch as he splattered beneath, just as I myself was squashed. The spikes, which had been supporting candles and torches, glowed red, and even from a distance I could see the heat rippling off of them. Lucian wrenched at his change. This would not be a clean death. And then I turned to the wall that Amarantha had gestured to. A lengthy inscription was carved into its smooth surface, and beneath it were 3 stone levers with the numbers 1, 2, and 3 engraved above them. I began to shake. I recognized only basic words, useless ones like the and but and went. Everything else was a blur of letters I didn't know, letters I'd have to slowly sound out or research to understand. The spiked grate was still descending, now level with Amarantha's head, and would soon shut off any chance I stood after getting out of this pit. The heat from the glowing iron already smothered me, sweat starting to bead at my temples. Who had told her I couldn't read? Something wrong? She raised an eyebrow. I snapped my attention to the inscription, keeping my breathing as steady as I could. Customer, give me just a second.
Pantry double doors open. Hello?
What can I get for you today, dear? I like those. 9,000? Mango, pineapple, coconut. I don't remember. Mango, pineapple, coconut, nectarine, raspberry, apple, watermelon, jackfruit, grapefruit, mango, passion fruit, strawberry, and green apple, lychee, pomegranate. Okay. I've been doing what you're doing for 7 years.
So it's mango, raspberry, and what?
Nectarine, raspberry, apple.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Is it 50? For every dollar you spend, you get a point and 100 points. Start getting money off if you wanted to set one up. $21.62. You'll hit that orange button on the top screen and then the right green button.
Does it take the first?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. So this one and
The right one. There you go.
oh, it's not.
You're totally fine. You too. What can I get for you then? No, there's 1.8, 1.2. Is it a red bottom or a black one? That it is. How many of those did you get? Oh, okay. As always, for every dollar you spend, you get a point. Get 100 points to start getting money off if you want to set one up. That first thing really. Right. Right. Something wrong? She raised an eyebrow. I snapped my attention to the
Sorry.
inscription, keeping my breathing as steady as I could. She hadn't mentioned reading as an issue. She would have walked me more if she'd known about my illiteracy. Fate. A cruel, vicious twist of fate. The chains rattled and strained, and Lucien cursed as he beheld what was before me. I turned to him, but when I saw his face, I knew he was too far to be able to read it aloud to me, even with his enhanced metal eye. If I could hear the question, I might stand a chance at solving it, but riddles weren't my strong point. I was going to be skewered by burning hot spikes and then crushed on the ground like a grape. The grape now passed over the lip of the pit, filling it entirely. No corner was safe. If I didn't answer the question before the grape passed the levers, my throat closed up, and I read and read and read, but no words came. The air became thick and stank of metal, not magic, but burning, unforgiving steel creeping toward me, inch by inch. Answer it, Lucien shouted, his voice hitched. My eyes stung. The world was just a blur of letters, mocking me with their turns and shapes. The metal groaned as it scraped against the smooth stone of the chamber, and the fairy's whispers grew more frenzied. Through the holes in the grate, I thought I saw Lucien's eldest brother chuckle. Hot, so unbearably hot. It would hurt. Those spikes were large and blunt. It wouldn't be quick. It would take some force to pierce through my body. Sweat slid down my neck, my back as I stared at the letters, at the 1, 2, and 3 that had somehow become my lifeline. 2 choices would doom me. 1 choice would stop the gate. I found numbers in the inscription. It must be a riddle, a logic problem, a maze of words worse than any worm's labyrinth. Feyre! Lucien cried, panting as he stared at the ever-lowering spikes. The gleeful faces of the high fae and lesser fairies sneered at me above the grate. 3 grasshoppers? The gate wouldn't stop, and there wasn't a full body length between my head and the first of those spikes. I could have sworn the heat devoured the air in the pit. Where, boon kings? I should say my goodbyes to Tamlin. Right now, this was what my life amounted to. These were my last moments. This was it, the final breaths of my body, the last beatings of my heart. Just pick one, Lucien shouted, and some of those in the crowd laughed, his brothers no doubt the loudest. I reached a hand toward the levers and stared at the 3 numbers beyond my trembling, tattooed fingers. 1, 2, 3. They meant nothing to me beyond life and death. Chance might save me, but 2. 2 was a lucky number because that was like Tamlin and me, just 2 people. 1 had to be bad because 1 was like Amarantha or the Adder, solitary beings. 1 was a nasty number, and 3 was too much. It was 3 sisters crammed into a tiny cottage, hating each other until they choked on it, until it poisoned them. 2. It was 2. I could gladly, willingly, fanatically believe in a cauldron and fate if they would take care of me. I believed in 2. I reached for the second lever, but a blinding pain racked my hand before I could touch the stone. I hissed, withdrawing. I opened my palm to reveal the slitted eye tattooed there. It narrowed. I had to be hallucinating. The grate was about to cover the inscription, barely 6 feet above my head. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The heat was too much, and metal sizzled so close to my ears. I again reached for the middle lever, but the pain paralyzed my fingers. The eye had returned to its usual state. I extended my hand toward the first lever. Again, pain. I reached for the third lever. No pain. My fingers met with stone, and I looked up to find the grate not 4 feet from my head. Through it I found a star-flecked violet gaze. I reached for the first lever. Pain. But when I reached for the third lever, Rasan's face remained a mask of boredom. Sweat slipped down my brow, stinging my eyes. I could only trust him. I could only give myself up again, forced to concede by my helplessness. The spikes were so enormous up close. All I had to do was lift my arms above my head and I'd burn the flesh off my hands. Feyre, please, Lucien moaned. I shook so badly I could scarcely stand. The heat of the spikes bore down on me. The stone lever was cool in my hand. I shut my eyes, unable to look at Tamlin, bracing myself for the impact and the agony, and pulled the third lever. Silence. The pulsing heat didn't grow closer. Then, a sigh. Lucien. I opened my eyes to find my tattooed fingers white-knuckled beneath the ink as they gripped the lever. The spikes hovered not inches above my head. Unmoving. Stopped. I had won. I had... The grate groaned as it lifted toward the ceiling, cool air flooding the chamber. I gulped it down in uneven breaths. Lucian was offering up some kind of prayer, kissing the ground again and again. The floor beneath me rose, and I was forced to release the lever that had saved me as I was brought to the surface again. My knees wobbled. I couldn't read, and it had almost killed me. I hadn't even won properly. I sank to my knees, letting the platform carry me, and covered my face in my shaking hands. Tears burned just before pain seared through my left arm. I would never beat the third task. I would never free Tamlin or his people. The pain shot through my bones again, and though through my increasing hysteria I heard words inside my head that stopped me short. Don't let her see you cry. Put your hands at your sides and stand up. I couldn't. I couldn't move. Stand. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you break. My knees and spine, not entirely of my own will, forced me upright, and when the ground at last stopped moving, I looked at Amarantha with tearless eyes. Good, Rysand told me. Stare her down. No tears. Wait until you're back in your cell. Amarantha's face was drawn and white, her black eyes like onyx as she beheld me. I had won, but I should be dead. I should be squashed, my blood oozing everywhere. Count to 10. Don't look at Tamlin. Just stare at her. I obeyed. It was the only thing that kept me from giving in to the sobs trapped within my chest, thundering to get out. I willed myself to meet Amarantha's gaze. It was cold and vast and full of ancient malice, but I held it. I counted to 10. Good girl. Now walk away. Turn on your heel. Good. Walk toward the door. Keep your chin high. Let the crowd part, one step after another. I listened to him, let him keep me tethered to sanity as I was escorted back to my cell by the guards, who still kept their distance. Rysand's words echoed through my mind, holding me together. But when my cell door closed, he went silent, and I dropped to the floor and wept. I wept for hours, for myself, for Tamlin, for the fact that I should be dead and had somehow survived. I cried for everything I'd lost, every injury I'd ever received, every wound, physical and otherwise. I cried for that trivial part of me, once so full of color and light, now hollow and dark and empty. I couldn't stop, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't beat her. She won today, and she hadn't known it. She'd won. It was only by cheating that I'd survived. Tamlin would never be free, and I would perish in the most awful of ways. I couldn't read. I was an ignorant human fool. My shortcomings had caught up with me, and this place would become my tomb. I would never paint again. I would never see the sun again. The walls closed in. The ceiling dropped. I wanted to be crushed. I wanted to be snuffed out. Everything converged, squeezing inward, sucking out air. I couldn't keep myself in my body. The walls were forcing me out of it. I was grasping for my body, but it hurt too much each time I tried to maintain the connection. All I had wanted, all I had dared want, was a life that was quiet and easy. Nothing more than that. Nothing extraordinary. But now I felt the ripple in the darkness without having to look up, and didn't flinch at the soft footsteps that approached me. I didn't bother hoping that it would be Tamlin. Still weeping. Rysand. I didn't lower my hands from my face. The floor rose toward the lowering ceiling. I would soon be flattened. There was no color and no light here. You've just beaten her second task, and tears are unnecessary. I wept harder, and he laughed. The stones reverberated as he knelt before me, and though I tried to fight him, his grip was firm as he grasped my wrist and pried my hands from my face. The walls weren't moving, and the room was open, gaping. No colors, but shades of darkness, of night. Only those star-flecked violet eyes were bright, full of color and light. He gave me a lazy smile before he leaned forward. I pulled away, but his hands were like shackles. I could do nothing as his mouth met with my cheek, and he licked away a tear. His tongue was hot against my skin, so startling that I couldn't move as he licked away another path of salt water, and then another. My body went taut and loose all at once, and I burned, even as chills shuddered along my limbs. It was only when his tongue danced along the damp edges of my lashes that I jerked back. He chuckled as I scrambled for the corner of the cell. I wiped my face as I glared at him. He smirked, sitting down against a wall. I figured that would get you to stop crying. It was disgusting. I wiped my face again. Was it? He quirked an eyebrow and pointed to his palm, to the place where my tattoo would be. Beneath all your pride and stubbornness, I could have sworn I detected something that felt differently. Interesting. Get out. Your attitude is overwhelming. Do you want me to kiss your feet for what you did at the trial? Do you want me to offer another week of my life? Not unless you feel compelled to do so, he said, his eyes like stars. It was bad enough that my life was forfeited to this Fey Lord, but to have a bond where he could now really freely read my thoughts and feelings and communicate. Who would have thought that the self-righteous human girl couldn't read? Keep your damned mouth shut about it. Me? I wouldn't dream of telling anyone. Why waste that kind of knowledge on petty gossip? If I'd had the strength, I would have leapt on him and ripped him apart. You're a disgusting bastard. I'll have to ask Tamlin if this kind of flattery won his heart. He groaned as he stood, a soft, deep-throated noise that traveled along my bones. His eyes met with mine, and he smiled slowly. I exposed my teeth, almost hissing. I'll spare you the escort duties tomorrow, he said, shrugging as he walked to the cell door. But the night after, I expect you to be looking your finest. He gave me a grin that suggested my finest wasn't very much at all. He paused by the door, but didn't dissolve into darkness.
Entry double doors open. Hello?
I was just about to take a break. If you discover a fresh new colour, you must share it with me.
I need to find more furniture stores. Mm. Oh. Ugh. Puppo, what you even do? What you even do? Oh, gross. Oh, gross. Look out, puppy. Oh shit. Look out, puppy. Oh.
Front entry double doors open.
Okay. I can't see where anybody commented on your stuff.
Have you opened up the comments on it?
Yeah, there's a chat next to your thingy on the computer. I can see your comments.
Make sure you click all comments, not just top comments. Because top comments will only show my top fans, which are you and you alone.
So on the website, like on the mobile, not on the mobile, the PC website, there's not like it just shows the comments.
Oh, really? I'm
Yeah,
looking at try closing out of the video and reloading it, because I've got a
I
comment on
just
there from somebody.
refreshed it.
It's by somebody called
I got it.
Grace the
Grace the
Younger.
Younger. Yeah, I got it now. Okay, ready? Okay, where was I? I'll spare you the escort duties tomorrow, he said, shrugging as he walked to the cell door. But the
While you
night
do
after,
this, I'm going to be outside walking dum dum.
okay.
So,
But the night after, I expect you to be looking your finest. He gave me a grin that suggested my finest wasn't very much at all. He paused by the door but didn't dissolve into darkness. I've been thinking of ways to torment you when you come to my court. I'm wondering, will assigning you to learn to read be as painful as it looked today? He vanished into shadow before I could launch myself at him. I paced through my cell, scowling at the eye in my hand. I spat every curse I could at it, but there was no response.
can
It
I
took me
tell
a
you
long...
a forecast?
I
I
would
think
love to hear where you think this is going to go.
I think Resand is a bad guy, but I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's a bad guy because he's forced to be.
I I love hearing your ideas about what it is.
I think she's going to wind up with Lucian in the end, not Tamlin.
Well, we're almost done with this book, so...
Yeah, but aren't there like 7 more?
Yeah, but all the answers are answered in the fucking second and third one.
Then what's the point of the rest of them?
You'll fucking see. Okay.
Continue.
I paced through my cell, scowling at the eye in my hand. I spat every curse I could at it, but there was no response. It took me a long while to realize that Rysand, whether he knew it or not, had effectively kept me from shattering completely. What followed the second trial was a series of days that I don't care to recall. A permanent darkness settled over me, and I began to look forward to the moment when Rysand gave me that goblet of fairy wine and I could lose myself for a few hours. I stopped contemplating Amarantha's riddle. It was impossible, especially for an illiterate, ignorant human. Thinking of Tamlin made everything worse. I'd beaten 2 of Amarantha's tasks, but I knew it deep in my bones that the third would be the one to kill me. After what had happened to her sister, what Jurian had done, she would never let me leave here alive. I couldn't entirely blame her. I doubted I would ever forgive or forget something like that being done to Nessa or Elaine, no matter how many centuries had passed. But I still wasn't going to leave here alive. The future I dreamed of was just that, a dream. I'd grow old and withered while he would remain young for centuries, perhaps millennia. At best, I'd have decades with him before I died. Decades. That was what I was fighting for. A flash in time for them, a drop in the pool of their eons. So I greedily drank the wine, and I stopped caring about who I was or what had once mattered to me. I stopped thinking about color, about light, about the green of Tamlin's eyes, about all those things I had still wanted to paint and now would never get to. I wasn't going to leave this mountain alive. I was walking to the dressing chamber with Rysand's 2 shadow servants, staring at nothing and thinking of even less, when a hissing noise and the flap of wings sounded from around an upcoming corner. The adder. The fairies beside me tensed, but their chins rose slightly. I'd never become accustomed to the adder, but I had come to accept its malignant presence. Seeing my escort stiffened awakened a dormant dread, and my mouth turned dry as we neared the bend. Even though we were veiled and hidden by shadow, each step brought me closer to that winged demon. My feet turned leaden. Then a lower guttural voice grunted in response to the hissing of the adder. Nails clicked on stone, and my escort swapped glances before they swung me into an alcove. A tapestry that hadn't been there a moment before falling over us, the shadows deepening, solidifying. I had a feeling that if someone pulled back that tapestry, they would see only darkness and stone. One of them covered my mouth with a hand, holding me tightly to her, shadows slithering down her arm and onto mine. She smelled of jasmine. I'd never noticed that before. After all these nights, I didn't even know their names. The adder and its companion rounded the bend, still talking, their voices low. It was only when I could understand their words that I realized we weren't merely hiding. Yes, the adder was saying, good. She'll be most pleased to hear that they're ready at last. But will the High Lords contribute their forces? The guttural voice replied. I could have sworn it snorted like a pig. They came closer and closer, unaware of us. My escorts pressed in tighter to me, so tense that I realized they were holding their breath. Handmaidens and spies. The High Lords will do as she tells them, the adder gloated, and its tail slithered and slashed across the floor. I heard talk from soldiers in Hybern. The High King is not pleased regarding the situation with the girl. Amarantha made a fool's bargain. She cost him the war the last time because of her madness with Jurian. If she turns her back on him again, he will not be so willing to forgive her. Stealing his spells and taking a failure to aid in his cause a second time is another. There was a loud hiss, and I trembled as the adder snapped its jaws at its companion. Milady makes no bargains that are not advantageous to her. She lets them claw at hope, but once it is shattered they are her beautifully broken minions. They had to be passing right before the tapestry. You had better hope so, the guttural voice replied. What manner of creature was this thing to be so unmoved by the adder? My escort's shadowy hand clamped tighter around my mouth, and the adder passed on. Don't trust your senses, Alice's voice echoed through my mind. The adder had caught me once before when I thought I was safe. And you had better hold your tongue, the adder warned, or Milady will do so for you, and her pincers are not kind. The other creature snorted that pig noise. I am here on a condition of immunity from the king. If your lady thinks she's above the king because she rules this wretched land, she'll soon remember who can strip her powers away, without spells and potions. The adder didn't reply, and a part of me wished for it to retort, to snap back. But it was silenced, and fear hit my stomach like a stone dropped into a pool. Whatever plans the King of Hybern had been working on for these long years, his campaign to take back the mortal world, it seemed he was no longer content to wait. Perhaps Amarantha would soon receive what she wanted, destruction of my entire realm. My blood went cold. Nesta, I trusted Nesta to get my family away, to protect them. Their voices faded, and it wasn't until a good extra minute had passed that the two females relaxed. The tapestry vanished, and we slipped back into the hall. What was that? I said, looking from one to the other as the shadows around us lightened, but not by much. Who was that? I clarified. Trouble, they answered in unison. Does Rysand know? He will soon, one of them said, sitting room. There was nothing I could do about the King of Hybern anyway. Not while trapped under the mountain, not when I hadn't even been able to free Tamlin, much less myself. And with Nesta prepared to flee with my family, there was no one else to warn. So day after day passed, bringing my third trial ever closer. I suppose I sank so far into myself that it took something extraordinary to pull me out again. I was watching the light dance along the damp stones of the ceiling of my cell, like moonlight on water, when a noise traveled to me, down to the stones, rippling across the floor. I was so used to the strange fiddles and drums of the fairies that when I heard the lilting melody, I thought it was another hallucination. Sometimes, if I stared at the ceiling long enough, it became the vast expanse of the starry night sky, and I became a small, unimportant thing that blew away in the wind. I looked toward the small vent in the corner of the ceiling through which the music entered my cell. The source must have been far away, for it was just a faint stirring of notes, but when I closed my eyes, I could hear it more clearly. I could see it, as if it were a grand painting, a living mural. There was beauty in this music, beauty and goodness. The music folded over itself like batter being poured from a bowl, one note atop another, melting together to form a whole, rising, filling me. It wasn't wild music, but there was a violence of passion in it, a swelling kind of joy and sorrow. I pulled my knees to my chest, needing to feel the sturdiness of my skin, even with the slime of the oily paint upon it. The music built a path, an ascent founded upon archways of color. I followed it, walking out of that cell, through layers of earth, up and up, into fields of cornflowers, past a canopy of trees, and into the open expanse of sky. The pulse of the music was like hands that gently pushed me onward, pulling me higher, guiding me through the clouds. I'd never seen clouds like these. In their puffy sides, I could discern faces fair and sorrowful. They faded before I could view them too clearly, and I looked into the distance to where the music summoned me. It was either a sunset or sunrise. The sun filled the clouds with magenta and purple, and its orange-gold rays blended with my path to form a band of shimmering metal. I wanted to fade into it, wanted the light of that sun to burn me away, to fill me with such joy that I would become a ray of sunshine myself. This wasn't music to dance to. It was music to worship, music to fill in the gaps of my soul, to bring me to a place where there was no pain. I didn't realize I was weeping until the wet warmth of a tear splashed upon my arm. But even then I clung to the music, gripping it like a ledge that kept me from falling. I hadn't realized how badly I didn't want to tumble into that deep dark, how much I wanted to stay here among the clouds and color and light. I let the sounds ravage me, let them lay me flat and run over my body with their drums. Up and up, building to a palace in the sky, a hall of alabaster and moonstone, where all that was lovely and kind and fantastic dwelled in peace. I wept, wept to be so close to that palace, wept from the need to be there. Everything I wanted was there, the one I loved was there. The music was Tamlin's fingers strumming my body. It was the gold in his eyes and the twist of his smile. It was that breathy chuckle and the way he said those three words. It was this I was fighting for, this I had sworn to save. The music rose, louder, grander, faster, from wherever it was played. A wave that peaked, shattering the gloom of my cell. A shuddering sob broke from me as the sound faded into silence. I sat there, trembling and weeping, too raw and exposed, left naked by the music and the color in my mind. When the tears had stopped, but the music still echoed in my very breath, I lay on my pallet of hay, listening to my breathing. The music flittered through my memories, binding them together, making them into a quilt that wrapped around me, that warmed my bones. I looked at the eye in the center of my palm, but it only stared right back at me, unmoving. 2 more days until my final trial. Just 2 more days, and then I would learn what the eddies of the cauldron had planned for me. It was a party like any other, even if it would likely be my last. Fairies drank and lounged and danced, laughing and singing bawdy and ethereal songs. No glimmer of anticipation for what might occur tomorrow, what I stood to alter for them, for their world. Perhaps they knew I would die too. I lurked by a wall, forgotten by the crowd, waiting for Rassand to beckon me to drink the wine and dance or do whatever it was he wished of me. I was clothed in my typical attire, tattooed from the neck down with that blue-black paint. Tonight my gossamer gown was a shade of sunset pink, the color too bright and feminine against the whirls of paint on my skin, too cheery for what awaited me tomorrow. Rassand was taking longer than usual to summon me, though it was probably because of the supple-bodied fairy perched in his lap, caressing his hair with her long greenish fingers. He'd tire of her soon. I didn't bother to look at Amarantha. I was better off pretending she wasn't there. Lucian never spoke to me in public, and Tamlin, it had become difficult to look at him in recent days. I just wanted it done. I wanted that wine to carry me through this last night and bring me to my fate. I was so intent on anticipating Rassand's order to serve him that I didn't notice that someone stood beside me until the heat from his body leaked into mine. I went rigid when I smelled that rain and earth and scent, and didn't dare to turn to Tamlin. We stood side by side, staring out at the crowd as still and unnoticeable as statues. His fingers brushed mine, and a line of fire went through me, burning me so badly that my eyes pricked with tears. I have a customer, I'll be right back. His fingers brushed mine, and a line of fire went through me, burning me so badly that my eyes pricked with tears. I wished he wasn't touching my marred hand, that his fingers didn't have to caress the contours of that wretched tattoo. But I lived in that moment. My life became beautiful again for those few seconds when our hands grazed. I kept my face set in a mask of cold. He dropped his hand, and, as quickly as he had come, he sauntered off, weaving through the crowd. It was only when he glanced over his shoulder and inclined his head ever so slightly that I understood. My heart beat faster than it ever had during my trials, and I made myself look as bored as possible before I pushed off the wall and casually strolled after him. I took a different route, but headed toward the small door half hidden by a tapestry near which he lingered. I had only moments before Rysand would begin looking for me, but a moment alone with Tamlin would be enough. I could scarcely breathe as I moved nearer and nearer to the door, past Amarantha's dais, past a group of giggling fairies. Tamlin disappeared through the door as quick as lightning, and I slowed my steps to a meandering pace. These days, no one really paid attention to me until I became Reese's drugged plaything. All too quickly, the door was before me, and it swung open noiselessly to let me in. Darkness encompassed me. I saw only a flash of green and gold before the warmth of Tamlin's body slammed into me and our lips met. I couldn't kiss him deeply enough, couldn't hold him tightly enough, couldn't touch enough of him. Words weren't necessary. I tore his shirt, needing to feel the skin beneath one last time, and I had to stifle the moan that rose up in me as he grasped my breast. I didn't want him to be gentle, because what I felt for him wasn't at all like that. What I felt was wild and hard and burning, and so he was with me. He tore his lips from mine and bit my neck, bit it as he had on Fire Night. I had to grind my teeth to keep myself from moaning and giving us away. This might be the last time I touched him, the last time we could be together. I wouldn't waste it. My fingers grappled with his belt buckle, and his mouth found mine again. Our tongues danced, not a waltz or a minuet, but a war dance, a death dance of bone drums and screaming fiddles. I wanted him, here. I hooked a leg around his middle, needing to be closer, and he ground his hips harder against me, crushing me into the icy wall. I pried the belt buckle loose, whipping the leather free, and Tamlin growled his desire in my ear, a low, probing sort of sound that made me see red and white and lightning. We both knew what tomorrow would bring. I tossed away his belt and started fumbling for his pants. Someone coughed. Shameful, Rysand purred, and we whirled to find him faintly illuminated by the light that broke in the doorway. But he stood behind us, farther into the passage, rather than toward the door. He hadn't come in through the throne room. With that ability of his, he had probably walked through the walls. Just shameful. He stalked toward us. Tamlin remained holding me. Look at what you've done to my pet. Panting, neither of us said anything, but the air became a cold kiss upon my skin, upon my exposed breasts. Amarantha would be greatly aggrieved if she knew her little warrior was dallying with the human help, Rysand went on, crossing his arms. I wonder how she'd punish you. Or perhaps she'd stay true to habit and punish Lucien. He still has one eye to lose, after all. Maybe she'll put it in a ring, too. Ever so slowly, Tamlin removed my hands from his body and stepped out of my embrace. I'm glad to see you're being reasonable, Rysand said, and Tamlin bristled. Now, be a clever High Lord and buckle your belt and fix your clothes before you get out there. Tamlin looked at me, and to my horror, did as Rysand instructed. My High Lord never took his eyes off my face as he straightened his tunic and hair, then retrieved and fastened his belt again. The paint on his hands and clothes, paint from me, vanished. Enjoy the party, Rysand crooned, pointing to the door. Tamlin's green eyes flickered as they continued to stare into mine. He softly said, I love you. Without another glance at Rysand, he left. I was temporarily blinded by the brightness that poured in when he opened the door and slipped out. He did not look back at me before the door snicked shut and darkness returned to the dim hall. Rysand chuckled. If you're that desperate for release, you should have asked me. Pig, I snapped, covering my breast with the folds of my gown. With a few easy steps, he crossed the distance between us and pinned my arms to the wall. My bones groaned. I could have sworn shadow talons dug into the stones beside my head. Do you actually intend to put yourself at my mercy, or are you truly that stupid? His voice was composed of sensuous, bone-breaking ire. I am not your slave. You're a fool, Feyre. Do you have any idea what could have happened had Emerantha found you two in here? Tamlin might refuse to be her lover, but she keeps him at her side out of the hope that she'll break him, dominate him as she loves to do with our kind. I kept silent. You're both fools, he murmured, his breathing uneven. How did you not think that someone would notice you were gone? You should thank the Coulter and Lucien's delightful brothers weren't watching you. What do you care? I barked, and his grip tightened enough on my wrist that I knew my bones would snap with a little more pressure. What do I care? He breathed, wrath twisting his features. Wings, those membranous, glorious wings flared from his back, crafted from the shadows behind him. What do I care? But before he could go on, his head snapped to the door, then back to my face. The wings vanished as quickly as they had appeared, and then his lips were crushing into mine. His tongue pried my mouth open, forcing himself into me, into the space where I could still taste Tamlin. I pushed and thrashed, but he held firm, his tongue sweeping over the roof of my mouth, against my teeth, claiming my mouth, claiming me. The door was flung wide, and Amarantha's curved figure filled its space. Tamlin. Tamlin was beside her, his eyes slightly wide, shoulders tight as Reese's lips still crushed mine. Amarantha laughed, and a mask of stone slammed down on Tamlin's face, void of feeling, void of anything vaguely like the Tamlin I'd been tangled up with moments before. Reese casually released me with a flick of his tongue over my bottom lip as a crowd of high fae appeared behind Amarantha and chimed in with her laughter. Rhysand gave them a lazy, self-indulgent grin and bowed, but something sparked in the Queen's eyes as she looked at Rhysand. Amarantha's whore, they'd called him. I knew it was a matter of time, she said, putting a hand on Tamlin's arm. The other she lifted so Jurian's eye might see, she said, You humans are all the same, aren't you? I kept my mouth shut, even as I could have died for shame, even as I ached to explain. Tamlin had to realize the truth. But I wasn't given the luxury of learning whether Tamlin understood as Amarantha clicked her tongue and turned away, taking her entourage with her. Typical human trash with her inconstant, dull heart, she said to herself. Nothing more than a satisfied cat. Following them, Reese grabbed my arm to drag me back into the throne room. It was only when the light hit me that I saw the smudges and smears on my paint. Smudges along my breasts and stomach, and the paint that had mysteriously appeared on Rhysand's hands. I'm tired of you for tonight, Reese said, giving me a light shove toward the main exit. Go back to your cell. Behind him, Amarantha and her court smiled with glee, their grins widening when they beheld the marred paint. I looked for Tamlin, but he was stalking for his usual throne on the dais, keeping his back to me, as if he couldn't stand to look. I don't know what time it was, but hours later footsteps sounded inside my cell. I jolted into a sitting position, and Reese stepped out of the shadow. I could still feel the heat of his lips against mine, the smooth glide of his tongue inside my mouth, and even though I'd washed my mouth out 3 times with a bucket of water from my cell. His tunic was unbuttoned at the top, and he ran a hand through his blue-black hair before he wordlessly slumped against the wall across from me and slid to the floor. What do you want? I demanded. A moment of peace and quiet, he snapped, rubbing his temples. I paused. From what? He massaged his pale skin, making the corners of his eyes go up and down, out and in. He sighed. From this mess. I sat up farther on my pallet of hay. I'd never seen him so candid. That damned bitch is running me ragged, he went on, and dropped his hands from his temples to lean against the wall. You hate me. Imagine how you'd feel if I made you serve in my bedroom. I'm High Lord of the Night Court, not her harlot. So the slurs were true, and I could imagine very easily how much I would hate him, what it would do to me, to be enslaved to someone like that. Why are you telling me this? The swagger and nastiness were gone, because I'm tired and lonely and you're the only person I can talk to without putting myself at risk. He let out a low laugh. How absurd, a High Lord of Prithian, and you can leave if you're just going to insult me. But I'm so good at it, he flashed one of his grins. I glared at him, but he sighed. One wrong move tomorrow, Feyre, and we're all doomed. The thought struck a chord of such horror that I could hardly breathe. And if you fail, he went on, more to himself than me, then Amarantha will rule forever. If she captured Tamlin's power once, who's to say she can't do it again? It was the question in her dead voice. He won't be tricked again so easily, he said, staring at the ceiling. Her biggest weapon is she keeps our powers contained, but she can't access them, not wholly, though she can control us through them. It's why I've never been able to shatter her mind, why she's not dead already. The moment you break Amarantha's curse, Tamlin's wrath will be so great that no force in the world will keep him from splattering her on the walls. Chill went through me. Why do you think I'm doing this? He waved a hand to me. Because you're a monster. He laughed. True, but I'm also a pragmatist. Working Tamlin into a senseless fury is the best weapon we have against her. Seeing you enter into a fool's bargain with Amarantha was one thing, but when Tamlin saw my tattoo on your arm, oh, you should have been born with my abilities, if only to have felt the rage that seeped from him. I didn't want to think much about his abilities. Who's to say he won't splatter you as well? Perhaps he'll try, but I have a feeling he'll kill Amarantha first. That's what it all boils down to, anyway. Even your servitude to me can be blamed on her. So he'll kill her tomorrow, and I'll be free before he can start a fight with me that will reduce our once sacred mountain to rubble. He picked at his nails. And I have a few other cards to play. I lifted my brows in silent question. Feyre, for Colden's sake, I drug you, but you don't wonder why I never touched you beyond your waist or arms? Until tonight. Until that damned kiss. I gritted my teeth, but even as my anger rose, a picture cleared. It's the only claim I have to innocence, he said. The only thing that will make Tamlin think twice before entering into a battle with me that would cause a catastrophic loss of innocent life. It's the only way I can convince him I was on your side. Believe me, I would have liked nothing more than to enjoy you, but there are bigger things at stake than taking a human woman to my bed. I knew, but I still asked. Like what? Like my territory, he said, and his eyes held a far-off look that I hadn't yet seen. Like my remaining people, enslaved to a tyrant queen who can end their lives with a single word. Surely Tamlin expressed similar sentiments to you. He hadn't, not entirely. He hadn't been able to, thanks to the curse. Why did Amarantha target you? I dared ask. Why make you her whore? Beyond the obvious? He gestured to his perfect face. When I didn't smile, he loosed a breath. My father killed Tamlin's father, and his brothers. I started. Tamlin never told me the Night Court was responsible for that. It's a long story, and I don't feel like getting into it, but let's just say that when she stole our lands from out from under us, Amarantha decided that she especially wanted to punish the son of her friend's murderer. Decided that she hated me enough for my father's deeds that I was to suffer. I might have reached a hand toward him, might have offered my apologies, but every thought had dried up in my head. What Amarantha had done to him. So, he said wearily, here we are, with the fate of our immortal world in the hands of an illiterate human. His laugh was unpleasant as he hung his head, cupping his forehead in a hand, and closed his eyes. What a mess. Part of me searched for the words to wound him in his vulnerability, but the other half recalled all that he had said, all that he had done, how his head had snapped to the door before he'd kissed me. He'd known Amarantha was coming. Maybe he'd done it to make her jealous, but maybe... If he hadn't been kissing me, if he hadn't shown up and interrupted us, I would have gone out into that throne room covered in smudged paint, and everyone, especially Amarantha, would have known what I'd been up to. It wouldn't have taken much to figure out whom I'd been with, especially not once they saw the paint on Tamlin. I didn't want to consider what the punishment might have been. Regardless of his motives or his methods, Rysand was keeping me alive, and had done so even before I set foot under the mountain. I've told you too much, he said as he got up to his feet. Perhaps I should have drugged you first. If you were clever, you'd find a way to use this against me, and if you had any stomach for cruelty, you'd go to Amarantha and tell her the truth about her whore. Perhaps she'd give you Tamlin for it. He slid his hands into the pockets of his black pants, but even as he faded into shadow, there was something in the curve of his shoulders that made me speak. When you healed my arm, you didn't need to bargain with me. You could have demanded every single week of the year. My brows knit together as he turned, already half consumed by the dark. Every single week, and I would have said yes. It wasn't entirely a question, but I needed the answer. A half-smile appeared on his sensuous lips. I know, he said, and vanished. I'm stopping there because I have to close the store in 9 minutes.
Okay.
I can read when I get home, or we can finish tomorrow.
That's up to you. I have to cook when you get
We
home.
have like 20 pages left. I would like to finish it.
Okay, then we can finish.
So we have like 20 pages left. I have to close up the store here in a few minutes, so I'm good with reading for right now.
I'm fine with that. Oh god, oh god, oh god.
What'd you do?
I almost crushed myself with my robot. It appears my robot also has a time limit.
So has your predictions changed?
No, I think she's... Yes. I think she's gonna marry Resand.
Why?
It's gonna be an enemies to lover.
Uh, Dude, I read a good enemies to lovers the other day. Unfortunately, I don't know the names of the books I have been reading. They're just in the Kindle. I have no idea. I can tell you about the books I've read in the last couple of weeks, but I don't know the names of them. That one about the Elysians, about the like descendants of the gods, basically taking
Yeah.
over the world. That was a really good one. I think you should read it. I think you'd like it. Also, it's really like okay, ACOTAR and all that stuff. Super. They're smutty. They're smut books. Like they read chapter 54. I don't know what to fucking tell you. But this Elysian one, like it's just straight porn, man. It's good. It's got a good story, but like it's just straight up porn.
Oh yeah. You said
I
that's
think it's
in
called the
the...
Elysian.
It's in the Kindles?
Yeah, I think it's called the Elysian Trial series. It's really good. It's not really a enemies to lover. It's more of a slow burn. That's why I don't like. That's why I don't like the Fourth Wing series. I just don't like the way it's written because like it feels like it was supposed to have been an enemies to lovers, but it feels like only one of them realizes they're enemies, and then Violet Sorrengail, the main character, is just like, I hate him, but also he makes my body throb, and I'm just like, I need you to calm your tits. I couldn't finish the last one. They're making it a show. I'm happy for that for Everest's sake because she will love that book. But I couldn't finish it. It
I
was
mean,
not
if
my
it's
cup of
just
tea.
straight porn... Oh no, you said the Elysian thing was
No.
porn.
The Elysian. Oh, there's definitely some parts in the Fourth Wing that are not family friendly, but it's nowhere genuinely it's not anywhere near as bad as the Elysians. And it's not bad, it's
That
really
explains
bad.
Megan's face every time she reads it on video.
Dude, it's super. There's one point where basically, okay, so if you ever listen to me or if you ever hear me listen to like any kind of EDM songs that have voiceovers, you'll hear a growling one that says "my house, my chair, my woman," because he basically drags in the female main character Violet, who is in love with him now, and he makes the throne room clear out and then sets her on the throne, and I'll let you figure out what the rest of what he does. But like in fucking book talk or whatever it's called, all the fucking book ladies like me, they go wild for this, and I'm just like, I don't see the appeal. All right, babe. I'm gonna drop out of the party. I'll call you on the regular phone because I gotta start closing up.
That's fine. I'm gonna clear out this fort and then come get you if I'm not done.
Okie dokie. All right, I'll see you in a little bit. I'm gonna
All
drop
right.
out. I enjoyed reading
8:15.
with you. Yes.
All right. I love you.
Love you too.
I'll hear from you in a minute.
Okay. Bye. Have a fun
Bye,
one,
honey.
babe.
Oh, you just do it from the app. I can probably kick you if I need to. Hey guys, we just finished and I'm about to close out the stream, but next time she will be reading me the second book. Thanks for watching.